In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing the show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube.
Welcome to the Perspectrum. I'm Nathan Seelove.
And I'm Michael Bloom.
And fuck the episode we have tonight.
Yeah, dude. Usually we say, like, we got an exciting episode. We had a fun episode. Nope. This is not fun.
It's all enraging, all depressing, all sad, all the time. Doom and gloom.
Yep. Honestly, don't listen. Skip now. Save yourself.
No, but it's important. It's important.
No, it's important.
It's stuff we need to talk about. We're going to be talking about Biden's immigration executive order.
Yep.
That basically takes all of the bad parts of that bipartisan bill that he was trying to push through Congress, keeps none of the good stuff, and just puts up a middle finger to his base.
Yeah, seriously. It's like he listened to our segment on immigration and was like, wow, that's a nice rake you got there. Let me just step on it. Oh my God. It's
which we have talked about. We have talked about that on this pod before. I have done that. It is shocking.
Oh,
how much it hurts.
It is absurd. I don't think there's a faster moving object in the universe than the tip of a rake. I
mean, look, last time I talked to a physicist about like creating faster than light travel, I was like, okay, I have a basis for you.
Yeah.
Rakes in a barn.
He's like
all right, study the movement of a rake in a barn, and that will crack the mystery behind interstellar travel. Like that's how you're going to do it.
And he was like, please get off my front porch. You've been here for 3 hours.
Yep. And then in keeping with our theme of Biden is terrible, we're going to talk about Gaza because there's more to talk about with Gaza. There's always more to talk about when it comes to Gaza because there is a genocide going on that our government and our tax dollars are actively funding. And Biden is laying out red lines and then wagging his finger when they're crossed and doing nothing about it.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that too.
And it's so frustrating because, like, guys, it gives us no pleasure to shit on Biden. He's
doesn't.
The president. We would love for him to do good things. And, like, he has to be the president again. Yeah. So it's like, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be here doing, like, shitting all over Biden. But, like, when you're pulling the kind of crap that he's pulling, it's
I mean, honestly, with the shit that he's pulling, I honestly have never seen a case in which a presidential candidate has tried this hard to lose.
Honestly.
Like,
it's kind of crazy. It's like it's like, and we'll get into some of the politics on these topics, but like it is as if they're so scared that they're going to lose that they're just like chasing their tail or really chasing the other guy's tail.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of crazy. All right, so let's get into it. So the executive order that the Biden administration put out, the order starts, the text of the order starts, quote, "There are more people around the world who are displaced from their homes today than at any point in time since World War II. Many factors have contributed to this problem. Failing regimes and dire economic conditions afflict many countries, including several in the Western Hemisphere. Violence linked to transnational criminal organizations has displaced substantial numbers of people in Latin America. The global COVID-19 pandemic upended societies around the globe. Natural disasters have forced people from their homes." And literally, that is how he starts the order. And literally, in response to these historic challenges displacing people all over the world and driving the poor and the tired and the hungry to the United States border, he fucking signs an executive order that will temporarily shut down asylum requests coming from those who are crossing the border and do a whole bunch of other shitty stuff that we'll get into. Like, he's literally like, the earth, the people around the world are suffering at disproportionate levels, and we can't look away from this.
Hold my beer.
Have to say, fuck off. You're not welcome.
Yeah. Jesus. Like, asylum seekers are specifically, like, they're not the type of immigrants that we typically think about. These are the people that have specific fears based on maybe corrupt authoritarian governments at home, which, by the way, the United States, odds are, probably propped up. Criminal violence, in some cases, persecution, identity-based persecution. These are people that need help, that are coming to the United States, that are upending their life because their life is in danger.
Yeah.
And Biden is just pulling the rug out from under them.
Yeah. And to be clear, it is their legal right to seek asylum once they're in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so the specifics of the executive order. So the main thing that it does is when the average number of daily encounters at the border, so the number of people that are like crossing and interacting with like border security that are non-citizens over, a trailing 7-day period tops 2,500, then this executive order like automatically goes into effect and essentially prevents immigration from reviewing the asylum claims essentially and conducting asylum interviews for people until that number of crossings drops below 1,500 again. They basically, for the purposes of immigration law, when a foreign national enters the United States, they are like lawfully admitted by like a U.S. official. So basically, the new policy would prevent border officials from admitting new asylum seekers once this 2,500 number of like crossings is hit. And so once it gets to that proposed level, they just stop implementing like credible fear interviews for asylum claims. And basically all they do is like take these folks and attempt to expel them from the country as quickly as possible. And basically it just shuts down our asylum system, except for some limited exceptions. So it's literally like you got too much homework when you were in college, and so you just decided not to do any of it. That is literally the solution that's in place here.
And like, look, the way that you solve the influx of immigration is more immigration judges, more caseworkers, more resources at the border to incentivize the legal avenue. The reason why people enter illegally or try to stay illegally is not because they just, want to take advantage of the immigration system. It's because the United States immigration system is terrible and doesn't make any sense. It's backlogged.
Yeah.
It takes forever to get through. And so a lot of people are just like, screw it. I need help now. I need to get away from whatever the hell was affecting me back home. I need to get out of this shit now. So like the fact that you are making it so that less people are able to use the asylum seeking process in order to come into the United States is actually going to result in more undocumented immigrants. Because you know what's going to happen? Asylum person trying to get away from some cartel that's trying to kill them back home or an authoritarian government that's trying to kill them back home. And they're told, well, sorry, we hit our threshold for today, so fuck you very much. They're not going to go back to that government. They're going to come back into the United States illegally. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if they do end up going back to the place where they have a credible fear, a lot of these people are going to fucking die. Like they will be like there's a reason why they are risking life and limb to like flee these circumstances to begin with. It is incredibly inhumane. And on top of that, like migrants who are expelled under this order will receive a minimum 5-year bar of reentry to the United States and potentially be criminally prosecuted. So like not only are we saying like we're going to turn these people away, but we're going to be like, well, and you can't come back.
Yeah.
Like you can't come back when the border is more calm.
Yeah.
Like
now the way that that's justified is by saying like, well, those are going to be for the people that are entering but not through ports of entry. But as we talked about, the asylum seeking process works a little bit differently. Ideally, they're going through ports of entry, but they're not always doing that because sometimes they're trying to flee shit.
Sure, totally. And it's, again, your right to seek asylum as soon as you're like in the United States. I mean, you can seek it when you're outside of the United States as well, but once you're on our soil, you have the right to seek asylum.
At least you used to be.
So what this does, yeah, exactly. Yeah, senior administration officials from the Biden administration said, quote, individuals who cross the southern border unlawfully or without authorization will generally be ineligible for asylum, absent exceptionally compelling circumstances, unless they are accepted from this proclamation. And they went on to say that, it will be even more difficult for people to reach the credible fear requirement under asylum. And people have to like make that claim affirmatively. Basically, like we would conduct these interviews to determine if people were eligible for asylum when they got to this place. And now it's incumbent upon them to try to advocate for them to even get any like treatment under asylum whatsoever. And then that bar is even higher and harder for them to reach. And on top of that, they will be immediately removed without like an attempt to determine if they're eligible under having a credible fear. So the administration said they, quote, anticipate that we will be removing those individuals in a matter of days, if not hours. So literally they're saying like, sure, usually it takes us 5 to 7 years to determine and adjudicate an asylum claim. And like the reason we have a backlog is because these cases, due process takes time. And obviously there's a huge backlog as well. But like these people, we're just going to say, if we close our eyes and shut our ears, we don't even have to do due process. We can just turn them away and say, fuck off. It's absolutely insane.
Biden promised to be different from Trump on immigration.
Yeah.
All right. One of the biggest reasons why people voted for him, why people hated Trump, was because of how cruel Trump was on immigration. How unbelievably cruel. The children in cages. All right. Getting rid of DACA, family separation, and shit like this, shutting down asylum seekers. All right.
Yeah.
This is why we voted for Biden, because we were disgusted by that. It's like Biden was thinking, oh, well, my base hates me right now. And literally, no matter what I do, no matter how right-wing of a policy I make, Republicans pretend I'm a crazy socialist. So,
and pretend the border's
open.
open.
I'm just going to continue to do Republican policies that I'm not going to get credit for by Republicans and piss off my base. It is the worst of both worlds. And the thing is, that that's going to happen. It's already happening. Republicans are already saying shit like, oh, well, it's too little too late. Like literally the moment I saw this, the moment I first saw this story, it was announced on Twitter. And there's this page that I don't follow, but for some reason I get notifications from it, called Biden Wins on Twitter. And it was framing this as a Biden win. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to look down through the comments, and I can guarantee you I know that the comments are going to come from two different people. All right. There's going to be the right wingers that are going to pretend he's still open borders, and the left wingers who hate him for this. And lo and behold, first comment, a Twitter called End Wokeness, criticizing him for shit like, well, you stopped the construction of the border wall, and you stopped Title 42, and you stopped the Remain in Mexico. You are for open borders, good sir. And then the one right after that, are you kidding me? Why are we celebrating this? He's turning away asylum seekers. How is this a win? Yeah. That is the thing. You are pissing off everybody. Everybody is going to hate this. What are you doing?
It's so
What
crazy.
Are you doing?
And like, last thing I wanted to say on the policy itself, just like, imagine this. It just makes an arbitrary cutoff at which point the strength of your asylum claim doesn't matter. You could literally be a Jewish person fleeing the Holocaust, and if you're unlucky enough to show up on a day when too many people have tried to seek asylum, I don't know, maybe because of the Holocaust, like, you will just be turned away. They don't care about the strength of your claim at that point. It's just like, sorry, too many people, and you're not allowed to come back.
It's like, and that might sound like an extreme example.
Absolutely insane.
But that's an example with historical precedent. There were Jews during World War II that tried to come to the United States to seek asylum and were turned away. Like, historically, when the United States turns away asylum seekers, that is not viewed in a good light. That is viewed as cruel and immoral. You are not the good guy if you do that.
Yes. Yeah. A representative from the Department of Homeland Security, he talking about the executive order, said that this will, quote, speed up our ability to quickly remove those who do not qualify for protection, which is wrong.
That's just not true.
He is incorrect about that, because what is true is that it just makes it easier to ignore those who do qualify for protection and still deport them. That's what this policy actually does, is take our asylum protections and just flush them down the toilet immediately in this case, and for as long as until we have, fewer people coming, I guess, to seek asylum, which doesn't make any sense because people are going to keep coming.
And hey, go back.
If we don't actually solve the root cause,
go back and listen to our episode about the economic benefits of immigration. All right. This is shooting ourselves in the foot. All right. First off, the United States is actually suffering a fertility issue. All right. There are lower birth rates than there previously have been, which means that Social Security, is actually in jeopardy, in part because of the decrease in population. Now, even if we tried to have more babies today, that wouldn't help us for another 20 years or so.
Yeah,
we need adults. Immigrants are basically people that another country was kind enough to grow for us, and they can just come right in, join our population,
and help us,
and start giving us additional revenue for Social Security. That one of the answers to helping with Social Security is more immigrants, and the ability to pay taxes. The ability to pay taxes and other, to pay other types of taxes is much easier when you have legal immigrants, which is why it is better to have more asylum seekers. These are people that are coming that can potentially help our economy. We also, in the last episode, we also talked about how immigrants tends to have more entrepreneurial drive, significantly more so than naturally born citizens.
People more money.
They pay people more money, and they're more likely to start a business than a natural born citizen, which means they're the real job creators. They're the real job creators.
Seriously.
So this is, you're not just hurting people who are trying to come to the United States for a better life or to escape something terrible at home. You're shooting yourself in the foot economically, and you're shooting yourself in the foot
hurting
politically.
All the rest of us. Yeah. Yes, seriously. One of the things that's so frustrating about this is that rather than making the actual argument about immigration and the border and all these stuff, Biden is just literally ceding the whole point and just trying to make it a political football. Literally in his executive order, he talks about fentanyl, and we talked about that last time. Something like more than 90% is coming through containers. This is not being smuggled across the border in people's pockets. Yeah. He talked about, we need to secure our border. This is all about Homeland Security. And it's we don't have a significant we don't have a significant problem of infiltration from the border. All of this stuff where he was covering, and the only reason you would cover this in the way that he did is to just try to see these political points, because this is just plainly his attempt at political recovery, because he has been a total wet blanket on immigration in general. He's failed to make an affirmative case for being pro-immigration. He's failed to implement policies that solve, or really even deeply advocate for policies to solve any of this stuff until it became a political crisis for him last year. And now he's trying to throw a Band-Aid on the thing to just try to like shelter himself from the political fallout of his own just lack of action, total like falling down on the job. Boy, I shouldn't say falling down on the job about Biden, but falling down on the job on this
what
issue.
Is he old or
like
something?
It's just yeah, it's really crazy. And to your point, Nathan, I can't imagine any world in which this actually helps Biden politically. And so he's just selling immigrants like out for nothing.
Now, here's the one counter argument. And I'll explain why this counter argument is wrong in a bit. But here's the one counter argument. It is true that polling does actually show that voters tend to trust Trump more on the issue of immigration than Biden. All right, that's what polling says.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. By a lot, by like 30%, according to some polls.
Yeah. Well, the most recent one, which is a Quinnipiac poll, said that 52% say Trump would do a better job handling immigration compared to 41% that said Biden, which is still a pretty significant, it's not 30%, but that's still a pretty significant divide. Here's the thing, though. To Michael's point, Biden has not made the affirmative case on immigration. Yeah. The only thing that we've been hearing at all has been the flooding of the airwaves of Republican politicians and conservative commentators saying, open borders, open borders, open borders, open borders, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
But when you hear it enough, when you repeat a lie enough and it is not directly negated, then there will be a segment of the population that aren't just racist. Like not all 52% of the people that say that Trump would handle immigration better. Not all of them are racist. They're just people that have been flooded with one case, like with one argument, with one bullshit talking point that has not been negated in any way whatsoever. But here's the thing. When Democrats make the affirmative case on immigration, it actually is effective. We know that because we have examples of it. Remember that time that Donald Trump got rid of DACA? Do you remember that? He ran on getting rid of DACA.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
All right?
Yeah.
He ran on that. That was one of his campaign promises to get rid of DACA. In an interview, he actually said, they got to go, okay? They got to go. If they want to come back, they can try to come back, but they got to go, all right? And then he does that. The entire Democratic Party just unites in opposition to that. And you know what ended up happening? Even Trump had to be like, okay, well, I didn't say that they should leave, okay? I didn't say that they should leave. He actually tried to go back on that. And you know what happened to public opinion?
Yeah.
By the end of Trump's presidency, 74% of Americans, according to Pew, agreed with giving legal status to Dreamers. 74%.
Damn, that's crazy.
All you need to do is make the goddamn case.
Seriously. And the Dreamers are a really compelling example, but we walked through 2 episodes ago that immigration itself has really compelling points.
It does.
It just is it's a very compelling thing. And to your point, Nathan, you're right. Republicans are yelling about open borders left and right. This is, the claim. Anybody who's reasonable is and informed recognizes that we don't have open borders. But you know what goes a long way towards legitimizing the claim that we had open borders? An executive order that claims to close the border. That is you know what this does? This is closing the border. And it's oh, so does that mean that they were open before, Mr. President?
Which means that Republicans can now say, well, it's too little too late.
Exactly. And Biden is attempting to be well, it was Republican obstructionism that caused this in the first place. Representatives of his administration like his press secretary, Andrew Bates, said, quote, "For 3 years, America's border security has been devastated by congressional Republican opposition to the law enforcement resources that that President Biden has sought. For 3 years, Joe Biden has led on border security and congressional Republicans have obstructed it, all in the name of politics." 2 problems with that. 1, you're the fucking president, Biden, and you had fucking Democratic control. And 2, you just signed an executive order without the help of Congress claiming to address the issue.
Yeah.
So which is it? Do we have open borders or not? Could you have done this all along and closed the border or not? Like, there is no political credibility to this move whatsoever. So anybody thinking about this, even a little bit, and like the people that are going to be spinning this on both sides will be thinking about it, will quickly be able to dispense with it as a political move. And so literally it is just like a move with no upside, even political, that is totally inhumane treatment of people seeking help from the United States. And the other thing, it's probably not gonna fucking do anything anyway, because it's gonna be challenged in the courts, as it rightly should be, because it is pretty clearly illegal, and it will be stopped up there. And so like it's just gonna be a couple of news cycles that makes no difference, but hurts people for the period of time.
Yeah, the ACLU has already announced that they're going to be suing the Biden administration over this, which good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, Lee Gillert, the deputy director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project, said, quote, "A ban on asylum is illegal, just as it was when Trump unsuccessfully tried it." And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So, Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good every week?
Well, Michael, we do Tips for Good every week because people equal shit.
Whoa?
People equal shit.
What? People equal shit. That's
no,
Latin.
People equal shit.
People equal shit.
Oh, that's an old,
because Latin makes the world a better.
That's an old song that my brother used to really like, and I don't remember anything about it other than the chorus, which was "People equal shit." And because I'm so pissed off right now, that's what I was feeling.
That's fair. That's fair. And the thing is, like, there's something powerful about the songs of our youth.
That is true.
They can really bring us back to a brighter time.
They can.
And that can make us.
They can make the world a better place. In fact,
honestly, they sure can.
Yeah. Which
maybe we should just go with that.
Let's do that. Yeah. Let's just do the whole making a world a better place. So Michael.
Good idea.
What is our tip for good this week?
Okay, our tip for good this week is maybe a little self-serving, but hear us out. Our tip for good is to stop paying attention to the news.
Not exactly.
Sounds controversial. No. I mean, in a nutshell, it's basically the idea that you and I don't need the tippy-top most breaking news available all the time.
Yeah.
What we need is a thoughtful consideration of a well-informed story to have the whole picture and form an opinion on a topic.
Yeah.
To be informed is what we need, but that actually is not the same thing and is often in tension with or works against the minute-to-minute coverage of a breaking topic. Because by definition, when it's first starting, you don't have the whole story. You don't have the whole picture. So you can step back from a story that's just unfolding. Take a moment. Like if you want to pay attention to it, okay, but hold off on forming your opinion until the whole thing is out, so that it can be a formed and thoughtful opinion, not just one that's developed off the cuff as a result of whatever facts happen to come to the surface first.
And look, it's tempting.
It is.
Like, it really is tempting. And I'd be lying if I said that I don't often find myself wanting to follow certain stories. Yeah. But like, let me give you all an example just to kind of give some perspective. So we very specifically didn't want to cover the Trump trial until it was done, because the media coverage of the Trump trial was so fucking like up to the minute, making shit up. And I don't mean making shit up like as in like they were lying about stuff. I mean like making shit up as if every little thing is important. like making shit out to be more important than it is. Like you'd have real-time coverage over Trump getting into his car to drive to the court on the to the court on the first day.
Yeah.
Like that is, you are not going to learn anything really about the trial, anything important about the trial by doing that. That is time that you could have spent covering a story about Gaza, you know, or covering a story about some pilot UBI program.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Something that actually is interesting that you can give people a good amount of information for. The point is, sometimes it is actually better to wait for a story to develop before actually looking into it, because you'll be able to go into it with and find more information. Because it's very easy for the media to jump the gun and assume something is true or speculate about something being true, only for it later to not be true.
Yeah.
And that's just an unfortunate thing that happens in our media in general. Like, and that's not a right-left thing. That's just something that, like, people screw up, and it's better to wait to see all the facts when it comes to some stories.
There's like two main problems that I'm thinking about when I think about the paying attention to the minute-to-minute coverage. One is you start to like gain an impression that something is true without knowing why it's true. Like if you're thinking about the Trump trial, in Nathan's example, you start getting the impression that, you know, say you were an impartial person, you didn't really know anything about Trump. You get the impression that Trump kind of sucks because he's farting and falling asleep in the courtroom and doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but what are the three most important parts of the trial? Like, what are the three most important things that prove his guilt, that are reasons why we should like support this verdict? Like that kind of information gets lost in the shuffle. And then the other thing is like, it's harder to reform an opinion than it is to form it for the first time. So if you form it well for the first time, you're going to be way better served than trying to like claw your way back from a misinformed
position. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that once said that, you know, and I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but it was something along the lines of one of the biggest barriers to like intellectual conversation is a person that knows enough about something to think that they're right, but not enough about it to know when they're wrong.
Podcasters, for example. And that's tips for good. So about 1 month ago, Israel launched an invasion into Rafah, which is the city at the southern border of Gaza, bordering on Egypt. And this is like the latest and one of the ultimate likely, you know, developments in the invasion of the region by Israel. Rafah was like the end of the road for people seeking safety from the Israeli offensive. So as Israel was like bombing the north part of Gaza and subsequently conducting a ground invasion into the north and slowly moving south, they were telling people to evacuate south. And then they have continued to take the rest of the land and move people further and further south. And at this point, Rafah has gone from a city of 275,000 people prior to the start of the war to now 1.4 million people. The vast majority of the people in Gaza now live in essentially a makeshift tent city at the southern border that Israel has now invaded in an effort to root out Hamas.
Well, so they say.
So they say.
That's the thing. Given how often that excuse is used to justify the bombing of children, it's really just starting to wear thin. I mean, in our last segment about the Israel-Palestine conflict, like, we talked about how caravans of aid workers who literally shared their coordinates with the IDF to say, hey, this is where we're going to be. We're aid workers. We're not Hamas. Don't bomb us. And yet they were attacked. I mean, I don't understand how you can't see that as deliberate at this point. I mean, look, standard important disclaimers, as always. Any criticisms that we lob at the Israeli government is against the Israeli government. It is not against the people of Israel, and it is not against the Jewish people in the world. All right. It is against the Israeli government. All right. We condemn anti-Semitism, and we believe that October 7th was a brutal and terrorist attack, and that Hamas is a terrorist group. However, right now, the IDF is also a terrorist group. They are targeting civilians, and much more civilians have been killed on the Palestinian side than were killed on the Israeli side. Significantly more. And it's been less discriminatory too. All right. Now we know, based on United Nations numbers, that at least a little over half are women and children. Now, the United Nations, which mainly gets their numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry, which we've already talked about how they do tend to be credible, don't have a specific distinction between civilians and non-civilians when they put their numbers out. But we do know that given the numbers of women and children, it is at least over 50%, likely significantly over 50%, because, again, not all military-aged males are Hamas. And given how many have been women and children, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that, that number is likely pretty high. Now, if you believe the Euromed Monitor, which is a human rights group based in Geneva, the number is nearly 90%, as in 90% of the people who have been killed have been civilians. But whether it's 90% or, between 50% and 90%, we know that an unprecedented number of children have been killed. An unprecedented number of civilians are being killed in this brutal bombing campaign.
Yeah.
That the International Court of Justice determined that the Palestinian people are at risk of having their right to be protected against genocide, that risk is credibly in danger.
Yeah. And all in pursuit, nominally, of an objective that the many people in the Israeli government and the IDF, leaders around the world, like international, like war and policy experts, have recognized is not a feasible objective to be achieved militarily, which is the defeat of Hamas. It is both true that the IDF, if they are pursuing this goal, is doing it by indiscriminately killing civilians. And it is also true that even if they were only killing even if these numbers were way lower in the collateral damage rates, they would still not be able to actually achieve the objective that they are attempting to achieve. So at this point, the war is at worst an attempt to, exterminate the people in Gaza. At best, it is Benjamin Netanyahu and his ultra-nationalist, far-right-wing government just attempting to hold on to power as long as possible and using the Palestinians and Hamas as scapegoats or I should say the Palestinians as scapegoats and Hamas as an excuse to stay in power and stay politically viable and keep the coalition government together, and for Benjamin Netanyahu to stay out of jail for corruption charges. There's no other way to spin it. It's not I don't want to use legitimate, but it's not a possible military aim. There's just no military upside here.
As Michael and I have pointed out before, historically we know that radicalization does not happen in a vacuum. All right?
Yeah.
The thing that ends up being good for the recruitment of terrorist groups are when people feel like they have nothing to lose, when people have lost everything. Now, I want to be clear. That doesn't justify their actions. All right? If your entire family was blown up and you decide your solution is to blow somebody else's family up, you are morally reprehensible. That is not justified. But on the macro level, we do know that radicalization is significantly more likely in the face of atrocity. And there is going to be very likely, not even very likely, there is more sympathy towards Hamas in Gaza than there has ever been because of this.
Sure.
The people in Gaza hated Hamas because they were a bunch of authoritarian assholes that took power like 20 years ago and basically just got rid of elections.
Yeah.
All right? But now, what they're seeing is basically, oh, well, I'm being bombed by these people. These people hate the people that are bombing me, so I guess that makes them the good guys. We don't want them to think that. We don't want Hamas to have legitimacy. They're a terrorist group. They're a terrorist group. So let's talk about some of the additional brutality that has been happening in Gaza. So we talked about how they started an offensive against Rafah, which was supposed to be safe. But the problem is, nowhere's safe in Gaza. At this point, nowhere is safe in Gaza. Israel bombed a tent city in mid-May, a tent city, the Tel Al-Sultan neighborhood, where there were thousands of people that were sheltering. And the city, the tent city, was bombed, and it killed 45 people. Like, these were people that were refugees already.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just some of the images are just horrific. I mean, there was this one image where there was this, like, it's hard to tell how old he was because his head was blown off, but he looked like he was at least like 2, 3, like a baby, had his head blown off by one of the bombs. And what's crazy about that is that there was actually one of the propaganda stories that Israel actually released after October 7th was they claimed that Hamas was going around and beheading babies. Now, to be clear, Hamas was doing a lot of horrible things on October 7th, all right? None of it was justified. But it turned out that wasn't true. They weren't beheading babies. The Israeli government is. There were videos of children being brought into makeshift hospitals. Now, most of the hospitals have been bombed at this point, or they're just semi-functional.
Yeah. And the lack of fuel, which has been severely curtailed by the closing of the Rafah crossing, means that patients are literally dying from lack of treatment, and hospitals are not, like, makeshift hospitals, literally in tents, are not able to even operate.
Yeah, 14 of the 35 hospitals in Gaza are partially functional. So these kids were being put into these hospitals screaming because of burns. They were needing to have their limbs amputated, but because of the blockade, they didn't have anesthesia. So while these kids who had been maimed by these bombs that the Israeli government had dropped and had to have a limb amputated, they couldn't even put them to sleep for it. They had to be conscious for it because they don't have the supplies. All right. At this point, 60% of residential buildings in Gaza have been damaged. 80% of commercial facilities. 267 places of worship. 86% of school buildings have been damaged. 83% of groundwater wells are not operational. And like I said, 14 of the 35 hospitals are partially functional. All right. As it stands, most recent casualty numbers, as of today, which we're recording this on June 6th, and this is according to the UN, which primarily gets their numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry. 36,654 people have been killed, which includes 15,000 children and 10,000 who are missing, who are likely presumed dead at this point. So that number should really be, in terms of people that have been killed, should really be 46,000. 46,000 people, right? At least 83,309 people have been injured, and that's just in Gaza. In the West Bank, during this entire conflict, 528 people have been killed, including 132 children, and more than 4,950 people have been injured in the West Bank. There's no Hamas in the West Bank. 500 people have been killed in the West Bank. There's no Hamas in the West Bank. You can't say that, like, they were just trying to target Hamas. And just today, the Israeli government bombed a United Nations school. They bombed a UN school where thousands of people were taking cover. Like, thousands of families, 33 people were killed. And you'll never guess what the excuse was, but Hamas. There was this one boy who escaped the blast, but was later at the hospital. And he told a reporter for Reuters, who, he lost his father in the strike. He was at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. He's on the floor of this hospital. His swollen face is badly bruised and bleeding. And he says, quote, "What will we do? There are no armed people in the school. The ones there are children playing. We play together. Why did they bomb us?" A kid whose father just died, who's injured from this bombing, is trying to rationalize, is being forced to rationalize why would they do this? Which, honestly, look, I don't even care if Hamas was in that building. There were civilians in that building.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that's the thing that I think that I think is missing from the conversation, because it's the question is, like, it has always been like, is it intentional? Is it not intentional? Are they targeting civilians? Are they not targeting civilians? Or are civilians just a part of collateral damage? And look, I think it's pretty clear that they have been deliberately targeting civilians in many of these cases. But even if they weren't deliberately targeting civilians in many of these cases, they're targeting areas that they know civilians are in.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Which is part of why the whole, they're using Palestinian civilians as human shields. That's why it wears thin, because the shields don't work, apparently. The shields don't work. You're just going to bomb them anyway. Because you have no fucking regard for human life. These people are war criminals. These people are complete war criminals. And what's the United States' response to this? Well, like I said, Biden had initially said that Rafah was his red line.
Sure. Yeah, he was very hardcore about it. Quote, "If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem." Wow. What an inspiration. But then they were like, yeah, but they're not really in Rafah. They're not like in Rafah. Yeah. Sure, yeah, there are tanks and troops that have pushed their way into Rafah, and they now control the whole city. They're in the city center. Sure, they've gained control of the whole border with Egypt. They've bombed. They've created civilian casualties. There's been direct fighting, but they're not like in Rafah.
Yeah.
We'll know when they're in Rafah.
Yeah. And the thing is,
that's literally
Biden has even admitted that he knows that, like, to one of Michael's points earlier, that he knows that the reason why Netanyahu is prolonging this war is because Netanyahu is worried about his own political power. All right, he is potentially in danger of being taken down because of corruption charges. So he is keeping this war where he is killing thousands and tens of thousands of innocent civilians just so he can keep his ass out of jail because he's a corrupt piece of shit. All right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which, amazing that you can say, you know how I'm going to protect myself from accusations of corruption? Become a war criminal. Like, it's insane. It is insane.
And unsurprisingly, the thing that seems to be moving Israel and the United States, like at least a little bit closer towards a ceasefire, the thing that seems to finally have like untongue-tied Joe Biden's tongue in pushing for a ceasefire is the fact that, yeah, guys, there's a bunch of political fallout when you target and kill civilians. And yeah, the U.S., when you're giving offensive weapons and 2,000-pound bombs to a government that, you know, is killing 50 to 90% civilians, like having 59% civilian casualties, yeah, there's some political fallout there. And so, like, you know, Joe Biden is now pushing for a ceasefire that would eventually have a permanent cessation of hostilities, lead to the rebuilding of homes in Gaza, lead to the rebuilding of public facilities, and like the only like the only reason that Israel seems like they may be possibly coming to the table on this is essentially because it's starting to become politically untenable not to.
Yeah.
Which is important. The political backlash is the only tool that we have to influence these people.
Yeah. Which is why I want to make sure that I make something clear to our listeners. You're not crazy. I know that the entire political establishment is saying that you're crazy. All right. And a lot of the media establishment is telling you that you're crazy. You know, you're hearing people like fucking Bill Maher be all like, oh, well, you care about dead children? You must love Hamas. Which, god damn it, that argument pisses me off so much. It's like, you hate the targeting of civilians, therefore you must love terrorists. What?
Definitionally backwards, guys.
Like,
you got it.
Like that's up. Actually like so Netanyahu, who is actually going to be coming to the United States to give a speech, which the fact that he has been invited in a bipartisanly to Congress.
Yeah. Just to talk to Congress, not to like negotiate, not to like have Congress try to ask him questions or try to pressure him. Nope. It's just, let's hear this guy tell us about how great his work
is. There are a lot of Democratic politicians that are boycotting it, a lot of more progressive politicians that are boycotting it, including Bernie Sanders. And Mike Johnson was actually asked about Bernie Sanders' decision to do it, to boycott it. And he was like, well, I don't know. I guess if he wants to go support terrorists, that's fine, you know, but I hope he changes his mind because we're going to be it's like, no, you're supporting terrorists. You're the one who's supporting terrorists. Bernie is the guy who condemns both Hamas and the IDF. Condemns both of them because he is a principled opposition to terrorism, which that shouldn't be hard to do. Taking a principled stance against terrorism, against targeting civilians, that shouldn't be difficult to do.
I don't know. Kind of sounds like liberal snowflake bullshit to me.
But like, you bringing Netanyahu into Congress is you supporting terrorism. That is you supporting terrorism. Because he's a terrorist. He is a war criminal. He is a terrorist. And one of the things that just should tell you how fucking backwards our politics are in the United States. So recently, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, the leaders of Hamas, and a few other officials in the Israeli government. And that was met with universal condemnation from both Democrats and Republicans, even though it's the most obvious fucking thing in the world. Like,
seriously,
it is the most obvious thing in the world. Now, what does that actually mean? It basically means that if they travel to countries that accept the ruling of the ICC, then they can be arrested. Now, the United States does not accept that, which is why he's allowed to come to the United States.
Yeah.
But there is actually a bill in Congress this week where the Republicans and a handful of Democrats tried to pass sanctions on the ICC, basically that would restrict travel of some of the members that were working on this case. And the Democrats and a lot of the Democrats are like, well, you know, I think we should temper this because, you know, the ICC does lots of good things. So I think that, like, yes, I'm against the ruling, but this is not how we should be opposing it. That is the Overton window in Washington. The Overton window in Washington is not like the ICC made the right decision because Netanyahu is a war criminal. The Overton window is, how much should we punish the ICC for calling a war criminal a war criminal? That is the debate.
Seriously.
That is the debate. That is so backwards.
It is so crazy fucked up. So so Netanyahu and a couple other people in his government are being charged with war crimes, crimes against humanity, including extermination, persecution, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, and intentionally targeting civilians in an effort to defeat Hamas. That is a pretty fucked up list of things. And one of the things that's so remarkable is, so in the same release, right, in the same charging document, the prosecutor, Karim Khan, also charged leaders of Hamas with crimes as well. So they are being charged with crimes against humanity of extermination, murder, taking hostages, rape, sexual violence, torture, and other inhumane acts as they connect to October 7th, right? And so he charged both of these groups with different things in the same document because it's related to the same conflict. And the reaction from the United States government, from many other international governments, and from the Israeli government has been like pearl clutching that they would, draw some kind of equivalency between the government of Israel and Hamas in charging them in the same materials. So first off, they're charged with slightly different things, and you can debate which ones you think are better or worse. But what's not the most full-throated and quoted and emphasized defense? It's not, no, we didn't do those things. It's actually, how could you charge us in the same document as the other guys when they're way worse? And it's it's crazy. So literally we're just focused on totally the wrong things. Literally, Khan has gotten threats from Republican lawmakers. A dozen senators wrote Khan, who's again the prosecutor from the ICC, saying that, quote, target Israel and we will target you. And in an interview, Khan said that a U.S. elected official, who he did not name, told him that the ICC was, quote, built for Africa and for thugs like Vladimir Putin, not for Western or Western-backed leaders.
What a telling thing to say.
Yeah.
Hey, you're supposed to go after our enemies, our opponents, when they commit war crimes. When we commit war crimes, you're supposed to turn you're supposed to turn around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason why the U.S. is not a member of the ICC. Yeah. It's because we literally do not and refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of any other body over our own judgment and actions. We will not and refuse to submit to the judgment or jurisdiction of any other body so that we can, with impunity, do whatever the fuck we want. And
yeah. So again, I just want to emphasize something to all of you. It doesn't matter what the political establishment says. It doesn't matter what the mainstream media says. Trust your eyes. You can see what is happening. You can see these images of children being bombed. These numbers of the people that have been killed. The aid workers who have been targeted. The United Nations buildings that have been destroyed. You can see them, and you are not crazy for thinking that is terrible. And it might seem like the entire political establishment is against you right now, but I just want to point something out. Look at history. Because we've been here before. We have been in places where the political establishment was for something that was some international policy, international war, or international government that was deeply, deeply immoral. and the truth won out eventually. The Vietnam War. The Overton window, back during the Vietnam War, in the political establishment, was, well, it's moral, but we shouldn't do it, versus, well, it is moral and we should do it. The political establishment was never trying to argue about, well, is this a fundamentally immoral war that we never should have tried to do? But that's what the people said. Mm-hmm. That's what those protesters on college campuses were saying. And now, almost universally, we look at the Vietnam War and we recognize that was wrong. That was horrible. That was wrong. Apartheid South Africa. The Reagan administration was actually really defensive of apartheid South Africa. All right? They supported apartheid South Africa. But eventually, once again, the protests, the opposition, they won. And eventually, because apartheid South Africa lost the support of the international community, it crumbled. And the Iraq War. When the Iraq War was going on, when people would say the truth, which is that there is no weapons of mass destruction, there's no evidence of weapons of mass destruction, the Bush administration is lying to you, do you know what they would be called in the mainstream media? Terrorist sympathizers. All right? Saddam Hussein sympathizers. That's what they were called. And yet nowadays, we look back at the Iraq War and we recognize that was a fundamentally immoral war that we were lied into. People that voted for the Iraq War, people that voted for it, today say that was a mistake. Now, many of them will pretend, well, I was always suspicious of it, but you know what their fucking vote was. The thing that we can learn from this, for this current situation, is that someday history will be the judge, and history will not look kindly on the people that were pro-babies being bombed. But I also want to add something else to that. Remember who was. Remember which politicians were completely okay with this. Never forget which politicians were complicit in this. Because a lot of the same politicians that were complicit in the Iraq War are completely supporting what's going on right now. Joe Biden voted for the Iraq War. He voted for the Iraq War. And right now, there's nobody in the United States more complicit in what is going on than Joe Biden. So the next time, when history does recognize the horrors of this, and there is a shift, and there's going to be a shift where universally it's going to be condemned and people are going to be disgusted by it. When that happens, don't forget which politicians were complicit in it. Because if you do forget that, they're gonna do it again.
And now it's time for one of our favorite segments, Ass Hat of the Week. So Nathan, who is our ass hat this week?
Well, Michael, our ass hat this week, and continuing with our theme from the last segment, which, maybe this isn't the best for an ass hat because this isn't particularly funny, but it's former presidential candidate Nikki Haley.
Ooh, Nikki Haley, come on down. Okay. Boy, she must have done something that just is funny and silly and not at all heinous, right? Surely, Nathan, please. Uh-oh. All right, so what did Nikki Haley do to be our ass hat?
So, you know how we've been talking about how genocidal basically a lot of the both rhetoric and actions from the Israeli government has been, and how the United States has been complicit in it? Mm-hmm. And you know how during the presidential election, there were a large number of people that thought, well, Nikki Haley is the moderate alternative to Donald Trump. All right. She's this moderate. She's reasonable. She's serious. All right. She cares about making arguments and being factual. And there were actually some people, and I'm not going to name any names, but you know who you are. There were some Democrats that when primaries came up, they were like, well, I'm going to vote for Nikki Haley because I'm going to vote in the Republican primary and vote for Nikki Haley because I want to sabotage Trump. I want to send a message to Trump. Well, it turns out she is just as, if not much of a fucking psycho as Trump when it comes to certain issues. So there was a photo op that Nikki Haley did. She was in Israel, and she did basically this. I don't know if you'd call it a photo op, but like, there's a photo of her standing in front of a bunch of bombs in Israel, bombs that are going to go to blow up children in Palestine. And she is signing it. She is signing them.
But surely she was saying something like, be careful, like use wisely, something like that, right?
Nope. She's saying, finish them. America, Israel, always.
Ooh.
Finish them.
Ooh. Oh, boy. The thing is, like, okay, most charitable interpretation, you're like, finish Hamas. But then you're like, wait a second, you're putting this on a bomb. So unless all the Hamas guys are just standing in a little penguin huddle, that's not what you're going to do. And when 50% to 90% of the people killed so far in this conflict have been civilians, boy, writing finish them on a weapon that is used for indiscriminate killing, sure, that does seem kind of psychopathy.
Yeah.
That is awful.
Nikki Haley is a disgusting human being. Like, disgusting. I don't know any other words to describe it. Like, that is the most morally reprehensible thing that I've ever seen. Like, that is horrific. And I can't believe that anybody in any serious capacity ever called her a moderate. All right. That is genocidal rhetoric.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, these United States bombs that are going to go bomb children. Tee-hee. Let me sign them. Jesus Christ.
Might as well have written, have fun.
Yeah. I just, and I'm folks, I'm sorry that this asshat of the week is not a funny one. This isn't a funny episode. I'm sorry, but we couldn't not talk about the fact, call out this disgusting, despicable, evil, heinous shell of a human being.
Yeah.
All right. You have lost your humanity if you do this. Yeah. Like you have lost your soul if you do this.
Yeah.
You're not the good guy if you do this.
Yep. Well, congratulations to Nikki Haley for being our
asshat of the week.
And now we'll wrap up our show. We'll start by taking a moment of silence for all of the innocent people that have been killed in Israel and Gaza as a result of this terrible conflict, and all of the fucking women and children and people who the U.S. has been complicit in murdering. Thank you for listening to The Spectrum, and you'll hear from us again next week.